When I look back on all my years in formal education through public schools, I realized that there really wasn't a lot of learning, true learning, that was taking place. You see, the entire system is built around the student's ability to memorize the information, regurgitate it enough to get a good grade, and then move on to the next set of lessons. There really isn't much true and deep understanding that's needed. So long as you can remember the material enough until you're quizzed or until you have to write an essay on it, then you're good, right? But nowadays, when I look back, I realize, yeah, I didn't really learn much in school. And the things that I did learn, if I was interested in them, or perhaps I had a really good teacher that year, there's a good chance that most of it had zero real-world application for what it is I'm doing now within my life. And I think that's how it is for most people who go through the public education system. They learn a bunch of things about history and math and science and English and writing and all these other topics, but by the next semester, most of what they've learned is just out the window. They've forgotten about it because the education system does not prioritize real learning. What it actually prioritizes is your ability to memorize the information and take a test and hopefully do well on it. I can't speak for everybody, but within my own life, I have learned more in these last 4.5 years of self-education than what I have in my entire 16 years of formal public school education. And it's a crazy thing to consider. And this isn't me saying that I had bad teachers or that they had ill intent. No, none of that. Just the system in general, the public school system in general, when it comes to educating the students, is not up to par with what it really should be. The primary reason why I think I've learned more in these last 4.5 years of self-education is because I've gotten to choose what I learn. I have gotten to choose the courses I take and the books I read and the people I speak with and the videos I make and the essays I write. All these things have been self-directed. It's not coming from some external source. It's not coming from some teacher who's saying, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to follow this exact script and this exact formula to solve the problem in this exact way. No, it's all self-directed. Now, it's obvious why the public school system is set up the way it is. It's set up to make you a worker bee, somebody who just does what their boss or manager tells them to do without any question and follows rules, follows directions, shows up on time, stays late, puts in the extra work even though they're not rewarded for anything more with that extra work. The system wants you to be this cog in the machine that continues to produce money so the money can be dispersed among people everywhere and the economy can flourish, and as people feed into consumerism and yada, 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 you get the point. I've talked about all this stuff in plenty of other videos. If you're somebody who's at least fairly perceptive, then you're well aware of all these things. And all this began back in the early 1900s with the General Education Board. This was developed in 1902, I believe, and funded by John D. Rockefeller the year after. If you don't know, John D. Rockefeller was the first billionaire who controlled most of the oil in America back in the late 19th century and early 20th century. So he wanted to build these factories with people who had been through a specific education system so that they would continue to do the work for him and he would make more money. Very simple. You don't need to read between the lines to really understand where he was coming from. But yeah, so he funded the General Education Board and he played a big part in promoting that all across the country. Now look, I'm not here to say that there's no learning at all within the school system. Obviously, that's not completely true. However, by and large, many students within the public school system are taught things that they simply aren't ready to learn or that they don't want to learn. These things aren't fascinating to them, or at least the material that's being presented isn't presented in a way that's interesting. And this is why many people go about disliking school, especially boys. We think, all right, well, I gotta remember these words and remember this formula and remember these dates and the names of these military commanders for this random war that I don't really care about in order to pass a test. And then once I pass the test or finish my written essay, then I can completely forget about it. And for most people, that is exactly what happens, simply because there's no interest in the material, or the material isn't presented in an interesting way, because quite honestly, many teachers are underpaid. Many teachers are overwhelmed by the behaviors of kids in the classroom, and honestly, they don't care enough. And then every couple of years, every student needs to go through standardized testing, which sure has some merit, but ultimately doesn't really gauge one's intelligence. I know there's been studies that say, oh, your scores on the SATs or the GREs determine your IQ and yada, yada, yada. But ultimately, one's IQ is only a small portion of their actual intelligence in terms of their ability to function within the world. Intelligence is way deeper than just your IQ. And standardized tests, to me, are not a good measure of one's total intelligence. So for many students who have gone through the public education system, they grow up hating school because, as I said, they don't like the material, or they aren't interested in it, or they just simply aren't somebody who fits within that school mold. And then they graduate from high school one day, and for many people, they stop learning after graduation day. That's it. Maybe some people will go to college and they do another 3 or 4 more years. They'll go to college, do another 3 or 4 years, get their degree, but it's the same thing. And then from there, learning stops. People stop reading. People stop taking courses. This is because the mindset of not liking school has been so deeply ingrained within their subconscious that anything having to do with learning is just disgusting. They hate it because they associate that with school. And they associate school with having to take stupid tests and write stupid essays that really don't matter all that much within your life. A lot of people will get jobs or work in the trades, and they learn the bare minimum of what they need to learn within their job. That's it. And I don't blame these people at all, because if you've been brought up to dislike learning through the conditioning at school, which wasn't really true learning itself, then how could you enjoy it as an adult, right? These beliefs and these perceptions and thoughts about education are so distorted within your mind that you think that education is a bad thing. The reality is that there's so much out there for you to learn. You can always find things that are interesting and actually relatable within your life, things that are fulfilling and fascinating, and things that will propel your life forward. But this comes down to self-education. You can literally choose whatever the hell you want to learn and just do it. As you can see behind me, I'm big into psychology and philosophy and neuroscience and consciousness and all these other things that you can see from my videos. But something that I've decided to learn is rebuilding engines and welding and electrical work. I'm learning how to build a car simply because I can. And I think a lot of people don't consider the fact that they can literally learn anything they want. You can go online and find any sort of creator. You can find an article, any random videos about a given topic, and just learn about it. You can read history that actually fascinates you. Not a little bit about this, a little bit about that. You can study the Roman Empire for 50 years and still have more to learn. You can study the depths of the human body, learn the biology of everything. You can study plants and animals and the stars and things that in school we were forced to learn only a little bit about, just so we could take a test and then eventually forget. Now, you might be thinking, all right, that's good to know, but I don't know what I'm interested in. I don't know what I should be learning about. I don't know how I should self-educate. And no worries, I get it. I was in that same position. This is mainly because for our entire lives, especially if you've been through the public education system, you were told what to learn, you were told what problems to solve, how to solve those problems, what to believe in, what path to follow, yada, yada, yada. So figuring out what you should be learning for yourself is very difficult because we're just not used to doing that. That's why I think the best thing you can do is pull out a piece of paper like this, and from there, you simply write out all the problems you're dealing with. You could list out 3 problems, you could list out 50 problems. I don't know your situation, but from there, you have essentially places to start researching. So you can find people online who talk about the problems that you're facing. You can find authors who write about topics that are related to the problems you're facing. Whatever the case may be, use the internet to your advantage, all right? Rather than distracting yourself, like I've talked about in countless other videos, use it as a tool, use it as a resource. And then at that point, you can listen to long form videos, podcasts, you can find awesome books to read. And then at that point, well, you're in a much better position than what you were before, because this is self-directed learning. This is intentional self-education rather than just being spoon-fed whatever BS information by state-trained teachers who ultimately don't really know about the material to the extent that they could, because they're really not interested in the material itself. So yeah, hope this made sense. Hope you enjoy this. The main goal here, my main objective here with this video is just to get you to start learning, start looking up things that are fascinating to you, start building new skills, because I think a lot of people these days just mindlessly consume, and we are flooded with so much information every single day. And it seems like we have more information, we have more knowledge within our heads, but our depth of knowledge is pretty shallow. We know a little bit about a lot of things simply because we're exposed to more information, but we don't know a lot about a few things that are deeply meaningful to us. And that to me it's a sad thing. So yeah, don't be a part of the majority. Pursue self-education, find things that are deeply interesting to you, and let's go from there, all right? Bit of a different video, but hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. I'll speak to you soon.